China's a tough place to govern. It's a huge country with a massive amount of geographic diversity, and even though the Han supermajority is over 90% of the population, the regions are so distinct that there's a lot of identities even within the ethnicity. North on the Yellow River, you've got the North China Plain, which is where about half the Chinese population lives, and it has always been tight in the grip of Beijing. In the south, you've got the cities from Shanghai going down to Hong Kong, which have always been a little secessionist and more integrated with foreign zones, especially when it comes to their food supply. So they've always had their own identity. And then in the middle, you've got the Yangtze River from Shanghai to Sichuan that has always been the most sophisticated and value-added and functional part of the Chinese economic system. And has usually resisted Beijing's rule, but they're still quintessentially Chinese. Ruling this is difficult because it means each region, each city has its own identity, its own idea of what should happen and not happen, and how to put it all together. And then in Beijing, you've got the emperor who has to manage all of this, and it means that China tends to oscillate wildly between two conflicting visions. On the one hand, there's local autonomy. You've got the locals who are determining what happens. They have a saying in China that the emperor is far away. And so the Chinese system tends to spin apart into dozens of competing systems. On the other hand, you've got the emperor who tries to hold it all together and tends to over-centralize as a result. And combining those two themes means that China has the most war-torn and internecine, conflicting history of all of the major cultures of all the world. Now, in the leadership years before Xi, this is not Mao, but his successor, Deng Xiaoping, and moving on from them, there was this idea that there had to be a degree of balance. So leadership involved the South, the central sections of the North, although the North was very clearly in charge, and the center was very clearly in the second position. But by the time we got to Xi, the decision was made that it's time for somebody who could represent all the regions, and Xi was brought in as kind of a compromise candidate. And then he took over. In his first 5-year terms, it was a massive, what he called an anti-corruption campaign, but was really a purge of all the competing power centers throughout the party and throughout the system. And whether you had a different view of what China should be or how to get there, you were kicked out. And if you were a local regional power boss, you were brought to heel. In the second 5-year term, Xi went after everyone who agreed with him to make sure that no one was capable of independent thought in his area. And that has made him the most isolated world leader on the stage right now, arguably the most isolated in Chinese history, and he's now more shut off from everything and all sources of information than even the Kim dynasty of North Korea. And so we are seeing catastrophic policy decisions being made in economics and trade with COVID and security. And for the bureaucracy, you kind of go one of two ways. Option number one is you are a true believer. And you think that Xi is the second coming. And so when you see him say something, you snap to and do your interpretation of it in the most zealotous way you can come up with. This is one of the reasons why the lockdowns in places like Hong Kong have gotten so extreme, and why you've got some idiots out there who are sanitizing airport runways because they think that's what Xi wants them to do to fight COVID. But the vast majority of the bureaucracy, knowing that if they get brought to Xi's attention, good or bad, it could be a disaster, they just don't do anything unless they're specifically told. So we're seeing a seizing up through the entire system because we have a leader that is so disconnected from everything. He's making decisions without any information whatsoever because nobody wants to bring it to him. And that means that the Chinese system now, the greatest threat to the Chinese system, the greatest reason to expect the Chinese system to collapse in the foreseeable future is the leadership. We think we have a problem in the United States going back and forth from W to Obama to Trump to Biden and all the issues and inconsistencies that. It's nothing compared to the complete information lockdown that now exists at the very top of the Chinese system.
If the Chinese have a significant policy change and kind of sue for peace as part of a globalization 2.0, there's definitely a conversation to be had there. I don't mean to suggest that aspect of this is past the point of no return. That would be really interesting. This is something that the W administration tried back before the 9/11 attacks, trying to bring China into a new revitalized globalized system. Obviously, we all got a little bit distracted about that. But the second problem, unfortunately, is much worse, and that's the demographic situation. According to the Chinese themselves, with the data they're starting to let out, they've overcounted their population by over 100 million people. Mm-hmm. All of those overcounts for people who would have been born since the one-child policy has been adopted, which was 40 years ago, so people 40 and under. And they were already looking at one of the fastest drop-offs in terms of birth rate in human history. You need 2.1 births per woman to maintain your population. In their metro centers, they're now below 0.7. I mean, this is faster than the Korean drop-off, and they haven't developed nearly as much as the Koreans have. So if these numbers are true, they're going to lose almost 2 Americas of population in just the next 30 years. And the average age will be older than the Japanese are now. This is not something, we don't even have a model. If you're talking about a population that drops by almost half in 30 years and the people that are left are in their 50s and 60s.
China is currently facing a number of economic and famine-related challenges. These challenges have been exacerbated by a combination of factors, including a slowing economy, a trade war with the United States, and a devastating drought that has affected many parts of the country. The Chinese economy, which had been growing at a rapid pace for many years, has slowed down in recent times. This is due in part to a decrease in demand for Chinese goods from other countries, as well as a decrease in domestic consumption. Additionally, the ongoing trade war with the United States has had a negative impact on the Chinese economy, as tariffs and other trade barriers have made it more difficult for Chinese companies to export their goods. Another major challenge facing China is a severe drought that has affected many parts of the country. This drought has led to crop failures and food shortages, which in turn have led to rising prices for food and other necessities. This has made it difficult for many Chinese citizens to afford to feed themselves and their families, and has contributed to the growing problem of famine in China. The Chinese government has taken steps to address these challenges, but so far, their efforts have been largely unsuccessful. They have implemented policies to stimulate the economy, but these have not had a significant impact. They have also attempted to address the famine by increasing food imports and providing assistance to those who are most affected, but these efforts have been limited in scope and have not been able to fully address the problem. In conclusion, China is currently facing a number of economic and famine-related challenges, and these challenges are having a significant impact on the lives of many Chinese citizens. The Chinese government has attempted to address these challenges, but so far, their efforts have been largely unsuccessful. It will be important for the government to continue to work to find solutions to these issues, so that the people of China can live in prosperity and security.